Hello and welcome. I'm Poltavka and you're watching the NewsX Eurozone. Let's take a look at the top headlines of this hour. Ukrainian drones have struck Russia's Orenburg gas processing plant, which is the world's largest facility of its kind. The Ukrainian attacks have caused fire and no casualties, according to Governor Yevgeny Solonsev. The attack has reportedly damaged part of Gazprom's complex with a 45 billion cubic meter annual capacity, as this marks the first reported strike on the strategic site. Thieves have reportedly carrying chainsaws made away with 9 items of jewelry from Paris' famous Louvre Museum. The museum has now been closed to the public and investigation into the incident is currently underway. A tunnel between Belarus and Poland has been discovered by Polish authorities, said to be around 20 meters long. Poland had accused Belarus of using migrants to destabilize the region, insinuating the role of tunnels for entry in Poland. Austria has now reversed its position and will support the EU's 19 sanctions package against Russia ahead of Monday's vote in Luxembourg, according to its foreign ministry. The package includes new energy and financial measures, such as a ban on Russian LNG from January 2027, while the European Commission moves to address Slovakia's remaining concerns. South African ICJ lawyer Ziad Patel has urged global action to enforce the ICJ's provisional measures against Israel, calling for sanctions, divestment, and an end to military cooperation with institutions complicit in Palestinian land seizures. Patel has also stressed on the fact that real change requires political will, domestic legislation, and international solidarity. Bolivian citizens are set to vote in the presidential runoff elections today, as conservative leader Rodrigo Paz and centrist leader Rodrigo Quiroga seek to end decades of socialist rule and address the country's ongoing economic crisis. Both candidates aim to strengthen ties with the United States and the next president, set to take office on November 8th. Millions of Americans rallied across all 50 states in No Kings protests against President Donald Trump's hardline policies, with organizers claiming attendance of 7 million nationwide. European capitals like London, Rome, Madrid, and Paris also saw widespread participation in solidarity with the American protests. Japan's Liberal Democratic Party and Japan Innovation Party have agreed to form a coalition government, paving the way for Sanai Takaichi to become Japan's first female prime minister. Under the deal, Ishin lawmakers will back Takaichi in Tuesday's parliamentary vote. Now for this hour, we start with Russia and Ukraine. Russian Ministry of Defense has announced the capture of 2 more towns in eastern Ukraine, the town of Chunishine in the Donetsk Oblast and the town of Poltavka in Zaporizhia. They have been captured by Russian forces, as announced by the Russian Ministry of Defense. Russian forces have also claimed to have successfully destroyed an American-made HIMARS missile defense system deployed in the region. Now for this discussion, we welcome Mark Sutherland. He's a geopolitical commentator, joins us live from London. Thank you very much, Mark, for joining us again. Good to see you. Now, looking back at President Zelensky and President Trump's discussion or meeting, do you think anything has changed ever since?
It's certainly good to be with you. Very often, in my own humble opinion, it's very difficult to read some of this. There is no doubt about it that President Trump genuinely is trying to bring people to the table, as others are, to end this war. We remind ourselves of the Russian invasion on February 2022. Also, as we may go on to discuss, where there's this discussion of is Tomahawk missiles going to be put into the theater of war, and all these other issues. There is so much that is talked about, threats, We want this to end, and it's working out constantly how NATO is then reinforcing itself. And of course, as I've said, people trying to bring people to the table to end this, and also part of that discussion where Russia has taken the land that it has from Ukraine, then understandably, the Ukrainians are saying, we want that land back. We want Russia to retreat out of this, and then there's going to be a rebuild and reparations to then be paid in this situation. And how the negotiations to even get that far to begin to discuss any of these, we are then realizing on both sides that that is not easy. And without sounding as if you're sort of being blanket in one's discussion, this has to end as fast and as quickly as possible. And at the moment, on a personal level, I don't see that happening. However, by then attacking the Russian infrastructure in regard to gas and oil and energy, that is what has been going on here. And to be fair, it's also been going on both sides. Asuma.
And Mark, going back to the Tomahawk missiles, there's a sense of hesitation on U.S.'s side to supply them, Ukraine with this. What do you think this reflects? Do you think this reflects a genuine concern about escalation, or do you think that this is a commitment by President Trump, about getting them to sign a ceasefire deal instead?
I'm not a technical expert on this, but the obvious question that can be raised, if you then put Tomahawk missiles or any kind of technology like this into any theater of war, then you would have to train the people that you are then supplying those to. Is that going to happen? Does it then mean that the oversight of these Tomahawks are then seen by the Americans themselves? Would they then be supplying American technology, American soldiers, operative of these rockets? And of course, that then opens up a huge debate, because then you put those rockets there, who is firing them, and then it makes that particular country then responsible to that. Is it all part of, we will threaten because we want to get Putin to the table? Because economically, Russia, it's not in a good place in regard to one's war chest wearing out because of the war that has been perpetuated since February 22. It raises all of those moral issues, Asuma. Frankly, I don't think, I think it's far more complicated. But yes, you are right, as in there's been a threat. Maybe people are then rethinking that one through. Asuma.
Yes. Thank you, Mark, for sharing that insight. Please stay with us as we stay on this topic now. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has recently met with U.S. President Donald Trump at the White House to discuss the possibility of providing long-range Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine. The meeting, which Zelensky has described later as frank and difficult, has left him empty-handed as Trump has ruled out the deal. Meanwhile, Trump has stated that he hopes the war can be resolved without the need for these missiles, as he believes the U.S. is already providing adequate military support to Ukraine. Now, these Tomahawk missiles have a range of up to 1,600 kilometers, making them a key strategic asset for Ukraine. The missiles would allow Ukraine to strike military targets deep within Russia, putting pressure on Russian President Vladimir Putin to negotiate a peace deal. Ukraine has also strongly believed that these missiles could be a game changer in ending the war, while Russia fears they would escalate the war further and damage its relations with the United States. Moreover, the European Commission's Kaja Kallas has promised to mobilize defense support for Ukraine, including the potential delivery of Tomahawks. However, Russia has criticized the West, claiming that there is a lack of political will for peace and that such actions only prolong the conflict. Now, for this discussion, we go back to Mark Sutherland. He's a geopolitical commentator, joins us live from London. Thank you, Mark, for staying with us. Now, going back to this, President Trump seems to be focused on brokering a peace deal with Russia. Do you think this is his strategic move for global stability, or for maybe future Nobel Peace Prize or does it risk undermining Ukraine's defense efforts?
I mean, the peace prize has come and gone in this round, and as you are fully aware, in regard to the Trump administration, whether they've been dealing with Armenia, Azerbaijan, and other parts of the world, whether we're looking at Sudan, an ending of the conflict in Sudan, we have to remind ourselves of the awful. We have a number of these conflicts around the world. We also remind ourselves what's happening in Nigeria, and I think there is genuinely within various people within the Trump administration, of course, they want this to end, where of course you are then lined with people that then want isolationism. The fact is that at the moment, in my humble opinion, this is only going in one direction, because this isn't stopping, and many people, including myself, we want this to then stop, because all it takes is it's a situation like we had in the First World War, where you take someone out and then suddenly it all blows up into a global conflict in the way that happened. This is what we're trying to avoid. Someone then puts a Tomahawk missile, it fires, as you said, to the range of it does, taking out a Russian city. The number one thing I would also say is that when drones are coming over into regard to European countries, they need to be, if they're proven, of course, where they've come from, or any identified flying object, shoot it down, get rid of it. This is not to be tolerated, particularly if this is Russia constantly challenging people's defensive. It's better that people have a talk and conversation and try and bring these two sides together. But on a personal level at the moment, there is so much for people to then give up. But we have to also remember the geopolitical changes that are going on. Where does Putin getting his support from? As you and I have discussed in the past, what is China doing? Where are they buying their energy from? Russia. What about Iranian support? What about North Korean support? All of that has to be remembered as these countries are trying to get the geopolitical hegemony away from America. They are wanting the worldview to change. This also has to be put into the mix as well. And yes, it makes it profoundly dangerous. We think that on the Russian side, nearly 1 million soldiers lost, the amount equivalent of that on the Ukrainian side, and all the devastation. This is appalling. It has to stop. And we want these people to come to the table and to genuinely seek peace and the end of this war. But at times it seems so far away. Asuma.
And Mark, lastly, how realistic is President Zelensky's request for U.S.'s security guarantees in the event of a ceasefire?
Very interesting, especially when the conversation that America has had with Qatar. That's another discussion that we need to have for a number of hours. This may be, but of course, as you are fully aware, within America, there are people that are turning around and going, okay, you may do that, but we do not want to see American troops on the ground whatsoever. That is something that the American administration doesn't want to do that, even though they're more than willing to then sell arms to NATO countries to then build up those defenses, in my opinion. That, and even though other European countries are saying, even the UK, Prime Minister Starmer saying, well, we're willing to put boots on the ground. Well, let's see how that works out. So America is far from willing to do that, even though it's got a number of hawks within America's senators, political positions, people like Lindsey Graham that may want something else, but he would, wouldn't he?
Yes.
That is what we're looking at. Do you put boots on the ground or not? And America is not willing to, in fact, do that.
Yes, it seems like that. Thank you very much, Mark, for always joining us and sharing that insight. Now we stay in Europe. French Culture Minister Rachida Dati has informed that France's Louvre Museum in Paris has been closed following a robbery. The minister has wrote on X that the robbery took place on Sunday morning as the museum was opening. French minister has confirmed that the jewelry stolen from the museum were priceless. The minister has told that 3 or 4 thieves have focused on 2 displays of the museum and carried out this robbery. The museum has also confirmed the same, stating that it was closing for the day for exceptional reasons. However, no further details were provided regarding this robbery. The French cultural minister has stated that investigations into the robbery are underway. The Louvre is the world's most visited museum and houses many famous artworks and other valuable items. Now for this discussion, we welcome Alexander Seal. He's a French and British journalist, joins us live from London. Thank you, Alexander, for joining us again. Good to see you.
Thank you very much. Hello.
Hey, Alexander, can you tell us more about, even though a lot of details are still under the clouds, can you tell us what we know for now?
Yes, the details are a bit sketchy. We now have official confirmation from the Paris Public Prosecutor's Office that an investigation has been opened into a suspected organized theft and criminal conspiracy to commit a crime. Authorities have confirmed that there has indeed been a theft of jewelry at the Louvre and that the probe is being handled by a specialist police unit that targets the illegal trafficking of cultural goods. According to reports, the thieves were carrying small chainsaws which they used to cut through the display glass. They allegedly took 9 items of jewelry linked to Napoleon and Empress Josephine before fleeing on a motor scooter heading south towards the A6 motorway. So far, the details haven't been confirmed officially by police or by the Louvre itself, but France's culture minister Rachida Dati says she's at the scene alongside police investigators, and she confirmed there were no injuries and that forensic examinations are underway.
And Alexander, it is in fact very surprising for the most visited and such a expensive museum, I must say, to be that some people were able, these robbers were able to get in with a chainsaw. How is this news covered in Europe or France over there?
Yes, it's hugely significant. The Galerie d'Apollon, the Apollon Gallery, is one of the Louvre's most famous rooms filled with priceless artifacts and royal jewelry. A theft there would represent one of the most serious breaches in the museum's modern history. The Louvre, as you said, is one of the world's largest and busiest art museums. It draws over 8 million visitors a year. It holds treasures ranging from ancient sculptures to Leonardo da Vinci's Mona Lisa. And earlier this year, President Emmanuel Macron announced a major renovation after the museum's director warned that overcrowding had become a physical ordeal. So security and visitor management were already under review before this happened.
Wow, so it seems like robbers took advantage of this anything that comes after review, it seems. Alexander, do we know anything more about these jewelries that were stolen?
We don't really know anything about it. We just know they were linked to Napoleon and Empress Josephine. There's a police investigation underway. The museum remains closed while police secure the site. Investigators are reviewing CCTV footage and interviewing staff. There is a sense of disbelief in Paris today, and perhaps in the next few days, both at the audacity of the theft and the fact it happened in one of the world's most heavily guarded cultural landmarks.
Yes, indeed, very shocking. Thank you very much, Alexander Seal, for joining us and sharing that insight as a French and British journalist. Now we move on to our next news. Portugal's parliament has approved a controversial bill introduced by the far-right Chega party to ban face veils worn for gender or religious motives in most public spaces. The legislation specifically targets burqas and niqabs worn by some Muslim women and includes penalties ranging from $210 to $4,250. Forcing someone to wear a face veil could carry prison sentences of up to 3 years. Exceptions to the ban include airplanes, diplomatic premises, and places of worship. The bill has now advanced to a parliamentary committee on Constitutional Affairs Rights freedoms, as well as guarantees for further review. President Marcelo Rebelo de Sousa retains the authority to veto this legislation or refer it to the Constitutional Court for a constitutional review. The move brings Portugal in line with several European countries like France, Austria, Belgium, and the Netherlands that have enacted similar full or partial bans on face coverings. Chega, a party previously criticized for promoting Islamophobic and anti-feminist rhetoric, claims the measures defends women's rights and national identity. Party leader Andre Ventura has described the law as a step towards protecting women from being forced to wear veils, a claim challenged by opposition lawmakers. Left-wing parties strongly opposed the bill, warning it could fuel discrimination and stigmatize Muslim communities. Two smaller parties abstained, citing similar concerns. Now for this discussion, we are joined by Dr. Asta Shada. She's a doctor at Rytsumikan University, joins us live from Warsaw. Thank you very much, Dr. Chada, for joining us again. Good to see you. Now, looking back at this news, to what extent does Portugal's face veil ban reflect broader trends in Europe toward secularization as well as cultural assimilation? And how do you think, how might this impact Muslim communities in those countries?
Thank you for having me here on this very, very pertinent discussion. I mean, in fact, sitting here from Warsaw, I mean, Poland is one of those countries that hasn't had yet a debate on that topic. It seems quite surprising that Portugal had to come out with this discussion at all. I mean, although it's not yet a law, it is a bill. But the very fact that they are pushing it as something intended for women's security once again brings to the fore the kind of discussions we've seen, ever since 9/11 regarding protecting women or making sure that women are saved from any form of coercion. So the arguments from the center right have been largely that they are going to punish people who coerce or force women to wear a veil, or they're going to promote some form of integration, which they intend or they imply that through their words, which in some way has been an obstacle in the past. Now, reading between the lines, I mean, of course, the bill in itself does not state clearly who this is intended against, but it's very obvious that certain religious communities, they might have that as part of their tradition to wear certain kinds of veils, right? So even though the headscarf in itself is not named, what they are intending to restrict is anything that covers the face. Now, is that a blanket ban? Well, if you read the bill, it basically says there are specific spaces that are excluded from this. So airplanes, any diplomatic premises, consulates, places of worship won't be part of it. Or there could be exceptions made for health, professional, artistic, entertainment, so on and so forth. However, the very fact that this is intended in some way to protect women is in itself a big question mark, because if you look at the Muslim population in Portugal, it's not too big. It's less than 0.5% according to their own census back in 2021. So that's one issue that obviously brings this whole bill into question. And the second aspect is that of national security. Now, Europe is not alone in banning any sort of face veils. You see, there are certain Muslim countries as well that have banned it in the recent past, and two of those that come top of my head are Tajikistan and Uzbekistan, again citing national security and aiming for greater reintegration or a move towards secularization. Again, one would question, whether this is really about a security measure to ensure that, police work or any sort of intelligence or information gathering becomes easier, or is this about further fueling divisions between religious and cultural communities that are intended to somehow have integrated well into the Western societies or into the Central Asian societies, which is something that they see has not happened. And thirdly, again, anytime there is a certain law or a certain bill or a discussion that tries to in some way side or other a certain community, there is a question on freedom of religion. So once this, if this were to take effect, like it has in France, Belgium, Austria, or other similar countries, one would once again question whether this bill is intended in some way to promote freedom of religion, wherein women are given an equal stature as men, or this is some sort of a disproportionate response. Because again, how many women who are veiled do pose a serious security threat, right? And to what
Yes.
extent should the state interfere when it
Yes.
comes to the idea of freedom of religion or protecting somebody's freedom of religion?
Yes, Dr. Asta, absolutely. There's a lot of question mark, especially when they say this is protecting women's rights or national identity. In case this bill proceeds or passes without a presidential veto or constitutional challenge, what legal and social precedents could this set for, future legislation targeting religious or minority practices in Portugal? As you've also mentioned that there's only 0.5% Muslims in Portugal according to the latest census, and even in that, maybe only few, because many Muslim people that even I know, not all of them wear this veil, right?
Absolutely. I mean, see, again, if this were to become a law of some sort, this wouldn't be the first time this is happening. We've seen a wave of such sort of restrictions being imposed in one way or another by several countries, and again, not limited to the West. We've seen that happen in Central Asia as well, and the kind of arguments that they give are ranging from uplifting women or protecting women's rights to some sort of social cohesion, right? Now, the implications are obviously going to be quite dire, because remember, we are talking not just about some sort of a security risk that a certain individual might or might not pose to the state. This is about state exercising control over women's bodies in a way. And any such law, whether it is covering the face or restricting a certain kind of clothing, or it's about a certain sort of an abortion ban, all of these in some way intend to restrict what women can or cannot do, right? And the state takes up in most of these cases. If you read through most of these laws and most of these bills, they in a way speak to each other in a very small vacuum. So they seem to be in some way preventing anti-extremism without taking into account how many of those, let's say, activities or extremist activities do take place in proportion to the wider population. So this has been, which is why you see, at least in Portugal, the parties on the left, even some in the center, some that abstained, but specifically the ones on the left critiqued it, and they were criticizing it mainly for not addressing the core security issues, if there are any, in Portugal. And given the fact that, at least in Portugal's case, Muslim population is fairly low, and amongst those, as you mentioned, maybe not all of them are actually practicing a certain form of clothing or a certain form of headscarf or a certain form of niqab, right? So what exactly is this intended to ban? What exactly this is intended to prevent? It remains quite unclear.
100%. Thank you very much, Dr. Asta Chada, for joining us and sharing that insight all the way from Warsaw. Now we move on to our next news. According to reports, a tunnel has been discovered by the officers of the Podlaski border guards. The discovered tunnel is said to be around 20 meters long, connecting Belarus and Poland. This is the second tunnel found this year, with the first near Narevka. On Thursday alone, more than 60 illegal crossing attempts were recorded, with over 26,700 since January 2025. Now, Poland had accused Belarus of using migrants to destabilize the region, insinuating the role of tunnels for entry in Poland. With Belarus being an ally of Russia, the second tunnel discovery raises serious security concerns for Poland as the Russia-Ukraine war continues. And that's a wrap on the NewsX Eurozone. Keep watching NewsX World for more news updates around the world.